The sky has always been a symbol of freedom, speed, and human ambition. But in that same sky, some moments are written in fire, loss, and silence. Today, we're going to look back at some of the deadliest and most impactful air disasters in American history. These aren't just accidents. They're profound lessons written in human lives, events that forever changed the way we fly. We'll explore the technical failures, the human errors, and the incredible moments of heroism that emerged from the chaos. Join us as we uncover the stories behind these wings of tragedy and triumph. On November 12, 2001, just 2 months after the September 11th attacks, the city of New York was once again plunged into a state of shock and fear. American Airlines Flight 587, an Airbus A300, took off from JFK Airport, bound for the Dominican Republic. On board were 260 people, many of them heading home to visit family. The morning was clear, and the takeoff seemed routine. But less than 2 minutes into the flight, disaster struck. The aircraft had flown into the wake turbulence of a Japan Airlines Boeing 747 that had taken off just ahead of it. Wake turbulence is like a pair of invisible horizontal tornadoes trailing behind a large aircraft, and pilots are trained to handle it. The first officer, who was flying the plane, reacted by making a series of aggressive, full rudder inputs, swinging the tail rudder from side to side. What he didn't know was that these movements placed an unimaginable amount of stress on the aircraft structure. The Airbus A300's rudder system was extremely sensitive, and his repeated, forceful actions exceeded the plane's design limits. Suddenly, with a terrifying snap, the entire vertical stabilizer, the huge tail fin, broke away from the fuselage. Without its tail, the aircraft became completely uncontrollable. It spiraled out of the sky and crashed into the residential neighborhood of Bell Harbor, in Queens. The impact was catastrophic. All 260 people on the plane were killed instantly, and the resulting fire on the ground took the lives of 5 more people. For a city already on edge, the initial fear was another terrorist attack. But the investigations soon revealed a different kind of tragedy, one born from a combination of pilot training, aircraft design, and a misunderstanding of aerodynamics. The crash of Flight 587 led to significant changes in pilot training programs, emphasizing smoother control inputs and a better understanding of how to handle wake turbulence and rudder controls. But not every air disaster ends in tragedy. Sometimes, in the face of certain doom, human skill and composure can turn a catastrophe into a miracle. This was the case on January 15, 2009, with U.S. Airways Flight 1549. The Airbus A320 had just taken off from LaGuardia Airport in New York City, carrying 155 passengers and crew. Just 3 minutes into the flight, at an altitude of about 2,800 feet, the unthinkable happened. The plane flew directly into a large flock of Canada geese. The sound was described by passengers as loud thumps, followed by an eerie silence. Both engines had ingested birds and flamed out, losing all thrust. The plane was now a glider, descending rapidly over one of the most densely populated cities in the world. In the cockpit, Captain Chesley "Sully" Sullenberger and First Officer Jeffrey Skiles remained incredibly calm. They immediately ran through the emergency checklist for an engine restart, but it was no use. The engines were damaged beyond recovery. Air traffic control suggested they try to return to LaGuardia or attempt a landing at a nearby New Jersey airport. But Sully, a former fighter pilot with decades of experience, knew they didn't have the altitude or speed to make it to any runway. He made a split-second decision that would become legendary. He announced over the radio, "We're going to be in the Hudson." He expertly guided the powerless aircraft over the George Washington Bridge, narrowly missing it, and lined up for a water landing on the frigid Hudson River. The landing was remarkably smooth. The plane stayed intact and afloat long enough for ferry boats and emergency responders to race to the scene. Incredibly, every single person on board survived. The miracle on the Hudson became a global symbol of professionalism, quick thinking, and the power of human judgment in a crisis. Now, let's travel back to a cold winter day in 1982. On January 13th, Air Florida Flight 90 was preparing for takeoff from Washington National Airport, bound for Fort Lauderdale. A heavy snowstorm had blanketed the city, causing long delays. The Boeing 737 sat on the tarmac for nearly an hour after being de-iced. During that time, fresh snow and ice began to accumulate on the wings. The flight crew made a series of critical errors. They chose not to return for another round of de-icing, a fatal mistake. Even worse, they failed to activate the engine's anti-ice systems. This caused the engine pressure sensors to become blocked with ice, giving the pilots false readings that the engines were producing more thrust than they actually were. When the plane finally attempted to take off, it struggled to gain altitude. With its wings covered in ice, disrupting airflow, and its engines not delivering full power, the aircraft simply couldn't fly properly. It lifted off the runway but barely cleared the ground, shuddering violently. Less than a minute after takeoff, the plane stalled. It clipped the 14th Street Bridge during rush hour, striking several cars and killing 4 people on the ground. Before plunging into the freezing waters of the Potomac River, the aircraft broke apart on impact. Only 6 people initially survived the crash in the icy water. In the chaos that followed, an incredible act of heroism unfolded. A bystander on the riverbank, Lenny Skotnick, saw one of the survivors struggling and, without hesitation, dove into the freezing river to pull her to safety. A helicopter crew also worked tirelessly to rescue the others. In the end, only 5 people survived. The disaster led to major reforms in cold weather operating procedures, ensuring that the deadly chain of events from that day would never be repeated. Finally, we turn to a disaster that revealed the terrifying power of weather. On June 24, 1975, Eastern Airlines Flight 66 was on its final approach to JFK Airport in New York. A severe thunderstorm was raging near the airport, and several other aircraft had reported encountering extreme turbulence and wind shear on their approach. Wind shear is a sudden change in wind speed or direction over a short distance, and it's incredibly dangerous for aircraft, especially during landing. The crew of Flight 66 was aware of the difficult conditions but decided to continue the approach. As they descended through the storm, they flew directly into a microburst. A microburst is an intense, localized downdraft that creates a powerful outward burst of wind near the ground. For an aircraft, flying into a microburst is like hitting an invisible wall of air pushing it downwards. The plane first encounters a strong headwind, which increases airspeed, and then suddenly enters a powerful downdraft followed by a tailwind, causing a catastrophic loss of lift and speed. The pilots of Flight 66 fought for control, but the forces of nature were simply too overwhelming. The Boeing 727 was slammed into the ground just short of the runway, where it broke apart and burst into flames. The crash killed 113 of the 124 people on board. It was, at the time, the deadliest single-plane crash in U.S. history. The investigation into the disaster was a turning point. It spurred extensive research into microbursts and led to the development of new technologies, like Doppler weather radar and onboard wind shear detection systems, which are now standard on all commercial aircraft. These systems give pilots advance warning of dangerous weather, allowing them to avoid it. From catastrophic mechanical failures and human error to incredible acts of heroism and the unforgiving power of nature, each of these stories left an indelible mark on aviation. The crashes of Flight 587, Flight 90, and Flight 66 were terrible tragedies, but the lessons learned from them have made flying safer for all of us. New training protocols, improved aircraft designs, advanced weather detection systems, and stricter operational procedures were all born from these events. And the miracle on the Hudson reminds us that even when technology fails, the human element skill, calm, and courage can still save the day. Modern aviation safety isn't just a set of rules. It's a living legacy built on the memory of those who were lost, and dedicated to ensuring that such tragedies are never forgotten and never repeated. The sky is safer today because we learned from the past. Thank you for joining us on this look back at these pivotal moments in aviation history. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the stories that have shaped our world. Let us know in the comments which aviation story you'd like us to cover next. Fly safe.